We are live.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for the next episode of the Patent Analytics webinar series. Today's presentation will cover using a patent analytics dashboard for IP strategy, competitor surveillance, and portfolio management. A webinar recording and the slides will be emailed to all registrants. Please feel free to enter any questions using the Q&A feature on the Zoom menu. And with that, I'll turn things over to Steve.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, welcome everybody to episode number 7. We've got one more episode to go. And I hope that this webinar series hasn't, turned into sort of another lost series, where things kind of unravel at the end and it's an unsatisfactory finish, but I don't think it will. I think we've got some great stuff today, and we're welcoming back Janelle Callis, who is has done a ton of analytics stuff at Schwegman. Janelle is one of our principals and has been in practice for a good number of years. I won't reveal the exact number, Janelle, for the protection of your privacy. And we have also Tom Marlowe back today. Tom is president of Renewals and former chief patent counsel of Fairchild. Tom runs the Black Hills IP renewal site, which has a lot of analytics baked into it, and he does a lot of analytics work through that affiliation. And then we have Mark Stignani, who's the analytics chair at Schwegman, and he's former chief patent counsel with Thompson, and Mark runs our analytics group at the firm and does a terrific job and has a huge amount of insight. So with that, let's roll into this and get going. So, I mean, what is a dashboard? Today, really, we're talking about what I would call sort of a aggregate dashboard. We're not going to talk about any very specific tools that you can license or use. There's a number of them out there. Most of them are pretty good, or all of them are valuable in some way or another. We won't get into that much until maybe the very end, talk about specific tools. But we're going to talk today about what kind of views you get out of these tools, what kind of insights you can get out of these tools. And some of the bigger picture stuff is sort of statistical view of your portfolio, competitor portfolios, the overlap, things that are happening in the industry, and various other things that we'll talk about. But let's go to the next slide. So, what are we going to learn today? So what kind of things can you learn by looking at, dashboard type of graphics analytics, if you will? What are some of the things that you'd be wanting to do if you wanted to, adopt best practices? And just a little bit about some of the things that we can actually do, benchmarking, strategic insights. And then I guess Mark will touch on dashboard tool sets. Next slide, please. So here's some of the questions you can answer, for various different uses. Before prosecution, there's statistics, or there's information we get off of dashboards that help you figure out maybe what innovations you should be patenting, what areas to innovate in. The overview of prosecution and portfolio composition, things like that. You can get information for licensing, information for standards, and the use cases are benchmarking, matter monitoring, technology sector monitoring, and prosecution monitoring. We'll roll on and start to get into the meat of this in a second. Next slide, please. So what's the really big picture for me is, these dashboards and these dashboard views, they kind of get you out of the woods and up on the mountain so you can really kind of see what's going on around you. I call it situational awareness, especially if you are in the, bogged down in the details of running a portfolio program, and you're spending a lot of your time making sure all the metrics are hit, things are done on time, the quality standards are met, the budgets are in line. You know, you've got all these things that are daily duties that you've got to grind out day in and day out. But sometimes you don't have enough time to sort of, okay, take a step back and take a look at what's going on around you. And, you know, as I think a chief patent counsel or even an outside patent attorney working for a company, you know, having like kind of that bigger picture view, a little bit of know-how about what's happening, you know, what's happening behind the scenes, having these insights, you know, can really be valuable from time to time, if nothing else, just to impress your executives with all the little things, you know, that nobody else seems to know, because they're got their head down and they're buried knee deep in trees. So, you know, we're kind of going to go through, I'm not going to go through the whole list here, laundry list after this, but we're going to start looking at some of those things that you can get and do. And, you know, just to kind of wet your whistle a little bit, you know, there's some of these analytics you can get, tell you how patents are being transferred around in the industry or who's buying patents. And you go, oh, why are they doing that? What's up over there that they think they need to get these patents? Because obviously they think they've got some kind of a weakness that they're going to have to be facing, you know, in their IP portfolio. And it's those types of strategic insights from the IP that maybe you can transmit back to the business people and then make yourself, you know, less dispensable, if you will. So next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark and just kind of have him go through now, you know, various different things, and then have Janelle and Tom will pitch in with their comments and hopefully some stories about things they've done.
Great. Well, thanks, Steve. And just kind of walking through this is just a slide from a dashboard tool that we utilize in here on a med device company. But one of the things that we really try to do in these types of dashboarding activities is really, you know, give you a sense for, if you're an in-house counsel, a sense for the resources that you are currently working on, the various aspects and where they are in prosecution, and try to give you as much quantitative data as possible in formats that are digestible by people who don't practice patent law. So your general counsel or your CMO, your CTO, or your CFO. A lot of the dashboards are set up and they're used almost exclusively to cut and paste interesting graphics and interesting notions about your portfolio or the competitor's portfolio in a way that's quickly digested by a non-patent practitioner. So in this case, you know, we're a med device portfolio. You know, it's a somewhat dated snapshot of a company, but it kind of gives you at a glance kind of the effort put into the various regions of the world where the bulk of the filings are. Also kind of, if you look up under the detail side, you see abandoned and expired. So you can see kind of the age of the portfolio, the ability of the patent holder to be comfortable getting rid of things. Also kind of family counts, size counts, citation counts. So you can get a sense for how robust that portfolio is literally in the, you know, just looking at simple graphics like this. And what we're really looking for as we're looking through dashboards are value proxies, things that quantitatively look at something that's valuable or interesting to both the client or the client's benchmarked competitors. And so that's largely what we're trying to accomplish with this view as well. One thing that you can also do in these types of viewpoints is really segment your portfolio or time slice your portfolio. So that this is one view. We regularly time slice our other clients' portfolios in a way that allows you to tag them in a way that is meaningful. This portfolio is tagged for assertion against a particular competitor. This portfolio is tagged for use along a certain product line, a certain product family. So I want to introduce the notion that slicing your portfolio in a number of different ways that you can quickly view using a dashboard are incredibly helpful when you're in-house if you need to get up on something quickly, or you're working with your counsel to get the right view of something that you can touch relatively quickly. So this is one reason we find dashboarding really helps in our deliverables to our clients by saying, well, here's a particular facet of this dashboard that you should look at. Janelle and Tom, do you have any?
You know, one thing that I would add in addition to using a dashboard to provide indications of, like you mentioned, the value indicators, also thinking about having the data on the dashboard being something that's kind of quickly and easily accessible information of things that may or may not need action, so that you can take a look at it and say, yes, that looks like it's what I expected or within tolerances, or there's something unexpected there, and the dashboard helps me see that quickly so that I can, you know, maybe take an action off of it. I think, I know we're probably going to go through a lot of examples in the upcoming slides, and for the audience, one thing to think about as we go through is what are those use cases and applications that would be most helpful for you and for your clients? What data would you want to see that's going to trigger you to say, oh, something needs to be attended to? Or on the other hand, things are kind of within tolerances, within, you know, along the lines of the strategy that we've got in place. So that's a good way to think about these things as you go forward, because we're going to present a lot of data. Not all of it will be useful to everyone all the time in every setting, but some of it will be particularly useful.
And to add to what Tom just said, I think that the dashboard of the future will have more and more merged data between, that combines business data with patent data, so that users can see how much portfolios are costing them, where the money is going, where their most valuable patents are in terms of dollars and cents. I just get the sense that this will be the next iteration of these intellectual property dashboards.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes,
No,
definitely.
And, you know, I think more and more dashboards are projecting what I like to call behavioral analytics, which, you know, take the behavior of a company and its IP portfolio, and I include trademarks in this, that, you know, will help you predict or project behaviors of a company. We'll talk about that kind of as we wrap up here as a teaser for what's to come here. But let's go to the next slide. So one of the things that when I was in-house, it was always easier to justify new revenue, new budget when I could show by patent counts what a competitor might be doing in a particular thing. And one of the quick ways to get there is via class codes. If you and the usual suspects are in a certain class code, this is another quick way of dashboarding yourself out and kind of trying to show more apples to apples. And again, so again, everything we're talking about here is high-level quantitative stuff that for real qualitative stuff, you have to dig much deeper into this. But, you know, if you're looking for something quick and dirty for a response that, or a month-end report to your general counsel, these are interesting tools to come up with a quick graphic. Next slide. So one of the things that I think is particularly useful about patent data is really the migration of inventors, and this is in many ways what Janelle was talking about, how this integrates other data. So these are inventors and their addresses that are available from the Patent Office. Again, some of the address data will be changing here as more and more of this gets obscured for privacy reasons. But one of the things that, especially if you're doing a due diligence or a comparator of one company versus the other, you can simply look at the migration of inventors. And, you know, various inventors are key to a lot of corporations' patent portfolios. And you can sort of see the rise and fall of these various inventors and their prolificity. So, I mean, you know, this is, of course, Medtronic's portfolio, but, you know, you can start to see kind of the, you know, the push and also the proclivity or the productivity of each of these inventors kind of as you time slice them over time. So Also using this to watch inventors that leave a company, because in many cases, if they start filing cases in a new company that is related in scope and technology, you do have the ability to go back and look at your employment agreements to see if there's some sort of a trade secret issue. So in a very quick way to get to something different but uniquely relevant to a in-house counsel to give an opinion on things. Janelle and Tom, do you have any other anecdotes around this?
Yeah, I mean, one other way that you can use this Inventor data is if you're trying to keep an eye on a particular technology area or an area where maybe a company's considering to move products into, you might get a look at who some of the more, I guess, maybe rising star inventors are in that area. Maybe that's, folks that are targets for cherry picking, or, because if you see some more coming out of particular areas, you might be able to go, try to recruit them, or, see, okay, these two are related to this startup company. They're creating a bunch of IP. Maybe we want to talk to them. And then as you dig deeper, you start talking about, say, an acquisition, and you've got two founders that are heavy on the inventor side. You're going to think about what that purchase agreement looks like, and what type of how you want to retain those folks that are creating the key IP, right? And all of that, obviously, that initial data isn't going to be in the dashboard itself, but you get the initial insight to do the digging from the dashboard.
Yeah, from a university licensing standpoint as well, as this is a quick way to find, people in the same field that are filing patents, that maybe to interact with at a professional level. In many cases, I've also, when I've been doing due diligences, I always look at inventors to see how much of the brain trust has left the company already. In one of my early due diligences in a previous life at an in-house role, I actually was looking at a company, and none of their key inventors were with the company anymore, and so that immediately caused me to dial down my upside review of the portfolio. Yeah, it didn't even have to go any further after that. I mean, everybody who was important to them had left. Other than that, Janelle, anything else, or otherwise let's move to the next slide.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting about inventors is that in many instances there are groups of serial inventors where they, especially in the medical device area, where they start up and move from one company to another, and that kind of data, the data that you showed, brings that out. You can identify those groups pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And I think that that's also another thing to look, if you're talking about non-patent literature, to try to cluster citations from non-patent literature around inventors as well, because then you can kind of see who's out in the industry still that's not snatched up by a competitor, and so you may be able to share that work, or at least part of that brain trust as you get those people inbound. So we've moved on to the next slide here, talking about year-on-year review. Now, this is probably one of the most boring slides out there, because if you say, so what? It's one company versus another company year-on-year review. But what's notable here is there's a general decline by priority date of matters being filed. Now you could say, well, that's just being less inventive, or they're less interested in patents, until you actually get down into of who is actually owning this. So this is an ultimate assignee slide showing Medtronic, all the vehicles of Medtronic and all the vehicles of Abbott overall. So one thing is I want to encourage people not to be deceived by is that you always have to look a little deeper into this. And so if we actually move to the next slide, we can start to see by ownership under an entity movement underneath the ultimate assignee. So we can start to see movements from various tax planning entities in different countries in Europe to the Luxembourgian tax entity right now, where you're starting to see a movement of matters from the Covidian and the Medtronic various entities into something that's more of a tax plan. So one of the things that dashboards can tell you at a quick glance is all the various entities, things are assigned for, and most big companies don't assign things without a purpose. And so if you're looking at Irish limited companies or Swiss AG companies or German GmbHs, you can rest assured that there is a close connection with those patents with some sort of an advantageous tax planning organization in that. So just as a quick way of being a detective in monitoring entity movement. Anytime you see a large scale assignment as well, always check how those assignments are going, because in many cases, a company has made a conscious decision to give up lost profits by making an assignment to a larger entity. And there's another reason beyond enforcement, I think, to that portfolio. Sorry, I've been dominating the floor here. Any other thoughts on kind of year-on-year monitoring and entities?
Yeah, I think the year-on-year monitoring, like you've got primarily on the last slide, from a dashboard perspective, like you said, it's not about necessarily from that slide looking at the detailed data, but it's what can the data tell you quickly that might lead you to dig in a little bit further like this. So in that case, is there a trend? Is there a group of years that have different comparative ratios between the two companies than other years? Have things changed as of recent? These types of questions that might need an answer and might give you reason to adjust strategy.
Absolutely. Janelle? Well, if no other...
Muted or something, you think?
Yeah, I like to look at the multi-industry data because it shows the overall state of invention in a particular country, and it shows where particular companies fit within that larger view.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, along that same line, the opportunity for kind of deep inspection into kind of how acquisitions are brought into the corporation as well, those have a high degree of relevance too. And if you're looking at how a particular company deals with its intellectual property through acquisition. So moving to the next slide. Another way of looking at it is also by representation. So I've switched over to Facebook here as showing kind of how Facebook portions its work out. And so you can start to see, both from a resource management standpoint versus the actual patent and application counts. You can start to see who's in favor, who's not in favor, based upon kind of a year thing. And of course, this has the 18th month secrecy window, so I tend to discount the last 2 years, but you can kind of see who, as a law firm, has been gaining favor with a particular in-house counsel, or whether the work has been going to. So again, this is always something to dig a lot more deeply into, because this is another place where you can pivot using a number of items, including class codes and other types of subordinate filters to really dive down and see who is really the right firm doing the work, who's if you're competitively benchmarking, which firms are you kind of going to be conflicted from working with, even though they might have the right expertise. And so I find this a very useful slide in reviewing how representation is assigned to a client.
Do you see this as a more useful as say a competitor or a company working in the space, or is this like you see this as I'm a law firm, either maybe Facebook's my client or Facebook could be my client, and I want to keep an eye on changes.
I think they're two different buckets, because I mean, if I'm a law firm looking for work, this is helpful to tell me who my competition is. That would take me the next step down to look at how the prosecution has fared for this particular law firm.
Sure.
So that if I have something to offer in that respect, I can highlight that when I'm speaking with the client. Or in the converse, if I am in-house counsel and I'm looking at how the work is going, and I realize that my average cost per matter with law firm A is about 50% more than my cost of matter for law firm B, maybe I should think about quickly shifting work for cost savings, or I would want to look more deeply at what the pair analytics of that particular law firm are, and see, you know, kind of where am I having problems? Am I doing more office actions? Am I doing more RCEs than with that firm, and why is that? So I find this, you know, it depends on the lens you're wearing, but I find it useful from both views.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. One of the things that came to mind when I was looking at a chart like this was that, let's say I'm a firm and Facebook is my client, interested to see how cases are and have been distributed across what you might call competing firms. And if there's movement in that, that might be information that's helpful for me to know to proactively get ahead of any issues or take advantage of opportunities.
Absolutely. And also, if I have a client who just has just changed chief IP counsels, you know, there is a strong correlation between that IP counsel if they're with a different company as to the law firms they work with. So, you know, there's in many cases, you know, looking under the covers of the data, you find it may be simply a personnel change that is causing this rather than a performance change of the law firm entirely. So, you know, all sorts of interesting detective work to be done on this type of evolutionary analysis. Anything else, or otherwise let's jump to the next slide.
I think just one caution regarding a graph like this is that you're really looking kind of back in time because of the significant time lag between patent issuance and patent application filing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you have a long relationship with counsel. So, switching gears utterly, one of the things that I find that a lot of dashboards can give you that people don't pay attention to is really looking at abandonments or expiring trends in you know, in a particular competitive benchmark. In this case, this is again Facebook. But you know, one of the interesting things here is that, you know, if you sort it by tranche, where, you know, you look at which level of renewal and which level of abandonment that they took with, you know, granted matters, you can start to see trends of where a company has lost interest in a particular set of technologies. You know, Tom had pointed out when we were reviewing these slides that there's, especially if you look at 2018 here, there's almost an equal abandonment in each of the categories here, and I you know, that tends to be indicative of abandonment of a technology area, rather than simply looking at particular matters and that just on their value of prosecution. But yeah, it was a good point out by Tom that you know, again, sorting things by tranche, I think, helps you understand where a firm is going, or a client is going with their technologies, because of what they're throwing away.
Yeah, and if this was my portfolio, then I'd be saying, okay, I see this kind of equal abandonment at what we've got in blue is the first maintenance period, green the second maintenance period, and dark blue the third maintenance period. And like you said, that can be indicative of dumping a technology area or a particular product, patents related to a particular product or business unit. But then the question is, okay, if that's the case, was that the intention, right?
Yeah.
So one, if that's my portfolio, but then two, if it's If this is me looking at a competitor's portfolio, then I'm saying, well, that's interesting. I wonder what it was that they dumped. Maybe I know that because there's some other news kind of outside of the IP world on it, but maybe I don't, and that can give me a little bit of insight into what's going on with this competitor.
Absolutely, and as I said, the whole behavioral analytics of why they throw things away, and especially if there are matters in there that look quantitatively valuable. So yeah, I can't agree with that more. Janelle, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a fan of looking at abandoned and expired patents because I think it can say a lot with respect to product life cycle. And that can go back to kind of strategy where if the product life cycle is 5-8 years, is it really worthwhile spending a fortune on patent procurement? Sometimes it's indicative of a company that kind of lost the race. Where there was a competition as to who was going to capture a particular product space, and a company that ultimately abandons probably lost that race. So I agree with you. I think it can tell a lot of different interesting stories.
Absolutely. Well, let's move to the next slide. Let's start, covering some of the less obvious things in dashboard monitoring. A lot of dashboards allow you to assign your own classifications to products or to notions that you care about, where statistical extracts of noun pairs and various individuals and so forth and so on. One of the things that I think a dashboard must be able to do is to give you quick insight into aspects of budget, aspects of what is covering your product, what things do you have kind of in process that could be addressing a competitor, and you can mine these out of a lot of different places. Some clients I work with, we look at marketing brochures and social media to find evidence of use, and then mark those in a dashboard. We're looking at citations or rejections. 102 rejection against another competitor is another way to kind of start to tag a group of patents that have had a significant impact on a competitor, even in the prosecution process. Also, tagging items by budget. So if you've got different budgets for different portfolios, if you have different business units that are contributing towards the patent budget, another way to very quickly look at a segment of your portfolio and how much revenue is associated with a particular segment of your portfolio, and renewals as well, which I'll kind of let Tom speak extravagantly on. But yeah, this is where I think the real value hits a dashboard.
And what's interesting here is there's a lot of dashboards, just generally speaking, that really have to be real-time, minute-to-minute data, like a car dashboard, right? You want to know your speed, your RPMs, maintenance issues as you drive. With IP, these things can have some, let's say, latency, right? And still be really, really useful. So when you get into items like you've got listed here that might require some additional work, like tagging, pulling data from other places, budgeting, getting product line, getting other business type of data, that's fine, and they'll get into the system and they're still useful from a dashboarding perspective as they get summarized. In fact, I think you don't have to, one of the things that's worth mentioning is you don't have to think about the dashboard as being this really dynamic type of view. And in some cases, a static report that's delivered on a periodic basis, that could be daily, that could be weekly, monthly, some of these things even quarterly, right? Depending on the data and what actions would be driven from them, can be really effective ways of doing dashboarding. We'll call that a word, dashboarding. That might. but they can be really effective that way. It doesn't have to be a really fancy and highly technical kind of dynamic interface.
Absolutely. And, but then, and this is also the thing is that if, in many cases, if you're in-house counsel, the last thing you have is time to learn one more system. So if you want the same behaviors of there, you can actually certainly delegate this work elsewhere because the tools are fairly robust. You can teach what you need, what you're looking for to a number of people who may not be as highly sought after for time as you are. So, the good news is a lot of this can just drop into a PowerPoint, and so that you can consume it on your morning.
Yeah. And the key being identifying what are those pieces of data that are most valuable to be in there, figuring out where you get them, figuring out how they get aggregated into your data, and then getting that dashboard view delivered. And if you can get all that stuff done behind the scenes, it doesn't matter if it takes a little bit extra time to have somebody else to do it, because you'll be able to get actionable data at the end that you can actually consume.
Absolutely. Janelle, did you have a closing thought on this one?
I think you guys covered it really well.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next slide then. And so this is a kind of extension of the last slide. I mean, one of the things that I like to work with, especially if you're looking at across a full benchmark of your portfolio versus other people's portfolios, is really taking equivalent product analysis. Because the unfortunate thing about claims is claims, even though they're meant to be broad, in many cases will have a feature or facet in them that misses someone else's product that you're trying to target by just so much. And so one of the things we like to try to do is come up with, their claims are covering these equivalent products. These patents also should maybe be put out on your patent marking lists where you can start to put people on notice. We can tag things based upon claim similarity. So if you're looking for some of a semantic review of things, you can run groups of patents, for similarity in the claim structure or the claim noun phrases, and you can mark them that way so that you can look very quickly across a number of patents owned by various individuals and say, well, these are all clustering into a similar area. And these are all things you can tag in there. Examiner citation, also very useful because a lot of people will flood an IDS with lots of citations that are of marginal value, whereas you can look at where an examiner actually took out there and decided what was useful. You can start to estimate legal spend. So if you have a sense for what a benchmark price would be for a tier 1 law firm's patent application versus a tier 2, et cetera, law firm, you can start to estimate what their actually real spends are. So I mean, this goes on and on. The one thing that we didn't really cover very heavily is kind of what's coming in the pipeline before you file a patent, because a lot of the new docketing tools are really putting more elbow grease into how you manage your disclosures, how you manage your new innovation, and maybe what priority claims you can maybe touch on with other applications that are still in the offing. So again, the types of things you can do with tagging are as rich as your brain can imagine. And so I'll let the other people respond if you have other thoughts on that. Or not.
That's good on my end, Mark.
All right. Well, let's move on then to the next slide. Unless, Janelle, you have anything? Or all right.
No, I don't.
Okay, so I mean, one of my favorite ways to look at a dashboard is, especially if you've got a large number of matters in prosecution, is to, and especially if you've got more than one outside counsel working with you, is to look at some sort of a dashboard that gives you a sense of it. I call it a shadow docket. Other people call it monitoring, and have a way that the dashboard has triggers for you. Triggers that are defined by myself, or defined by in the discussions with outside counsel on how to have a discussion about a particular matter as soon as something happens that we care about. In this case, I've 102 rejections or office actions and RCEs that go beyond the, kind of the standard. It also compares how we're performing in light of a competitor within pair. I mean, we're largely talking US here because most of this data is not available to the rest of us anywhere else. And also to find stuck things. Yes, thank you. So this is a prosecution dashboard of again another large med device company, and we can see that on a very quick high and relevant look, I think I would want to understand what my 5th office action, 6th office actions are buying for me, and I've done a fair bit of analysis into this company, especially in the high office action count area and the high RCE count, and you want to try to figure out what's driving that, because I mean these are expensive patent applications. These are driving a lot of your business costs in this. In most cases, the patent prosecution costs are a very significant budget item in the GC's council. So the GC is always asking, why are we paying so much money for things? So this is a very, very quick way for me to look at what's happening in office actions, RCEs, interviews. And this is another thing that's, I think not enough law firms engage in interviewing, because it clearly has a benefit. And we can start to see kind of where things are going through. It also would give you an indication of whether or not you're claiming things too broadly. If we look at the 4th line down, or the 4th graphic in yellow there, where allowances after office action responses at 6+ office actions, you're finally getting something allowed. I would really want to look at what is actually, that might be a very small piece of real estate that's being allowed after your 6th office action. So, I mean, I can go on this one forever, but I'll take a pause now. And Janelle, please also chime on in here. Or if not, I'll
Yep. I think on the prosecution front, you mentioned shadow docketing on the last slide, and I really agree and think this is an underutilized space. Many companies have an in-house docket that's really used less as a docketing system, that is to track like due dates and prosecution documents and that thing, and it's more of a repository to store data and drive analysis and dashboards, and some of them don't even have like this level of detail in them, but that's ultimately what a lot are after. In many cases, I think simply taking a step back and thinking out what data it would be needed to see, what would a thought out dashboard look like, it would be probably 5 to 10 times more valuable than even having that docketing system in-house. And in some ways, it could even replace it.
Absolutely, and like especially for the mid-range companies that don't really have their own docketing system in there and are relying upon one or more outside firms to give them this data. I mean, this is discussion data that if you want to look at this, the bottom left-hand graphic, which talks about number of office actions after 3-month deadline. Well, you're paying extra fees for those, each one of those missing. So you have a consistent set of misses on office actions filing after the 3-month deadline. So you're paying an extra fee just for that response each and every time. So I would want to click through on each one of those items to figure out, is it my set of inventors that aren't being responsive, or is it simply we are just letting the law firm, file these things as needed. And then it's also another discussion of who's eating those fees when you're doing the filing work as well. Also, go ahead.
I think more companies are looking at extension of time fees for U.S. prosecution, and I think that's a good move because when those fees are going up, and two, they can be a significant part of the budget. So I think that's an effort that is well worthwhile, and a dashboard like this can illustrate the magnitude of those costs quite well. I think in the next generation of dashboards, it would be kind of cool to show kind of the the cross citation of references among competitors, because that will show companies something about their vulnerability with respect to technology that appears to have been invented by their competitors first, or their relative position as pioneers in particular areas. But that can be seen overall, but it can also come up in office action rejections more incrementally.
Yeah, and also this ties in strongly with kind of your examiner analytics, which we've covered earlier. Figuring out how many, what particular group of your technology, and this is where your tagging also comes important. If you're having a particular set of issues with a particular product line in getting them through the patent office, this is where you might want to look a bit deeper at, is it the examiner? Is it, the firm I'm working with? Is it truly the subject matter? Because this is where the true power of analytics comes out in prosecution, is that, you can start to understand, am I getting hit with 101s here a lot? Is this a really thick area where, a 102 is happening? And also, what's the benefit if I initiate an interview versus the examiner initiating an interview? Because there's real differences in performance when you see an examiner interview initiated versus a client or a law firm initiated interviews. So again, the next generation of analytics people are popping them out left and right. I think there's a stunning amount of insight that you can see above and beyond something as simple as this. And Tom, do you have any closing thoughts here? Otherwise, I will move on to the next slide.
That's good. That's great.
All right, fantastic. So, and then this is kind of where I'm going, I think the next generation is going. So in a dashboard, I want to be able to see, at a glance, where something has happened. I also want to be told by the dashboard when something interesting that I've had has happened. So in this case, you've got a 102 rejection tree. You kind of see everything in your portfolio has either gotten a 102 rejection from another piece of art, or is causing 102 rejections in your particular piece of art. This again is Facebook. And so some of these anomalies are easily explained in a static display, but if you start seeing 102 rejections against Google happening in your portfolio, as we've highlighted here, then you certainly want to identify what's happening, why it's happening, and then take action. And this is a great place to start thinking about a weekly or a monthly review with the client to say, hey, you just got this happened here. There's 102. You have an open application here. It appears to be related to this product, and this is also your corresponding product here. If you have all that in the dashboard, you can answer that question in seconds rather than, going through the effort at that point in time to say why. The same thing too. If I've just suddenly been 102 by an Apple matter, then I better go back and look at the Apple matter. So that's really what this slide's trying to convey. Anybody else, or should we keep trucking here? Let's move on to the next slide then. So this is the new frontier in my mind. Dashboarding is going to start doing, because I think dashboards, if you're anybody who's worked in the financial services area, they have extremely exquisite algorithms that help you start to look at companies in distress and companies in growth. And the same thing is really possible using IP filings, because IP filings have the behavioral aspect to them as well. And so introducing this is that, in my review over thousands of companies, you can start to see patterns of distress. They will stop paying their annuities. You'll see a large amount of abandonments that have really no reason to go underlined to that, or their filings have dropped off, or their inventors are leaving and going elsewhere and filing patents in other places. There's about 50 other indicators that I've come up with that would lead to me to think the company is distressed, but these are the biggies. Also, have they changed how they enforce? Because in many cases, companies that are experiencing economic downturn will then turn to a fairly aggressive litigation profile where none had existed before. And also, you can look at various assignments. Do you see items transferred away, for a quick cash bump, or are there patent assignments to large financial entities that would include some sort of a financing or a bridging payment that goes into that. Alternately, the same thing goes in their side, except companies in growth have a much different profile, and you have to look much more broadly than patents to get to that standpoint. So I'll let everybody kind of read for that itself, but I find trademark filings especially are beyond helpful in this, determining where a new growth pattern. And you can have as much stealth as you want, but if you haven't done your trademark filings, you're equally in trouble. So people tend to disclose their trademark filings where they're going with stuff. So again, stepping out above and beyond patent work, this is going to be, I think, a very exciting area in the next 3 to 5 years as people turn the crank on this type of behavioral analytics. I'll step back and let everybody else talk.
I really like this type of analysis from a in-house perspective, especially, but you could see it applied for outside counsel as well. Sometimes this competitor or text-based type of data can be really useful just for to stay appraised of, or like, let's say you've got a group and you've got attorneys or agents or patent engineers that are assigned to and embedded with certain product lines or business units. Their dashboards are going to look a little bit different of the companies that they're keeping an eye on in a particular space. But where some of this isn't going to drive immediate action, it can help to see kind of an update of what's going on with a handful or more of known competitors in a particular area, so that during when you've got someone in the IP function that's joining a product line meeting, a weekly or a strategic meeting with a business unit, and one of these competitors comes up, there's a little additional insight that might be able to be added. Someone might be able to say, oh yeah, we've seen them, they're filing a lot more in this particular space, and there's a piece of data that is adding value to the discussion because of a little bit of dashboarding and a little bit of attention that's paid to what's going on with that company, kind of from an IP or related side of things. Can be really helpful.
Janelle, did you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I agree. I think that this type of data is extremely helpful in tracking competitors or possible target companies for procurement. I think it's very useful, and I also agree that adding trademark filings to patent data can be extremely helpful. There's been more than one instances where I've been able to basically knock out patent claims because the claims have been described in trademark filings long before the patent application was filed. So to have both of those data sets together kind of allows those types of checks to be done quickly and fairly easily.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I really like that one, Janelle. That's awesome. And also, as for the, we have a group of licensing people also who are looking at these types of things. If you're looking to pick up what are generally higher quality patents, you may want to step into a quick license or a quick patent sale if you can start to understand a company starting to see financial distress. I was involved in a very large acquisition a while back where the target company had gone into bankruptcy. The stalking horse had actually been able to pick the company up with a fairly good patent portfolio. But as then the stalking horse turned around and put that company up for sale with a couple other assets. And we were able to look at that, and we were at a certain price point where we're based upon the patent portfolio. Then we started to see a massive set of abandonments and then ultimately a sale of a large proportion of that to another company that was doing the same thing we were doing. And suddenly, that company lost $100 million in its valuation overnight from that type of analysis. So I ended up a bit more of a hero in that one one thing than usually I'm the buzzkill in acquisition work. So anyway, so there's just a ton more stuff that is not particularly IP related, that is directly traceable to the uphill side or the downhill side of a company's performance. So I think any other questions? Otherwise, let's move on here. And so we're at the end here. Key takeaways. Please, anybody who has questions that we haven't covered, please throw them into the question answer area here. We think that dashboards give time back to in-house counsel. They are also a really good tool to talk to your client with if you're outside counsel. This will tell you when there's a problem that is easily fixed or easily discussed. A lot of people may not, who are law firms, may not want to deliver bad news to your client that something's going wrong in prosecution. But if you actually be the person who brings the problem to them and helps them understand the problem and then help them mitigate the problem, I think that is a much more powerful approach and makes you a bigger partner with that client than simply just the bearer of bad news. Panel? Anybody else?
Well, hey, thanks, Mark and Janelle and Tom for that presentation. It was very informative, and I guess we've got one more left to go. And so I guess Michelle will give a little update on that to finish off our webinar today.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone. Our next presentation will take place on Thursday, July 23rd, and it will be the last presentation in the Patent Analytics series. It will cover using patent prosecution history reports to increase prosecution efficiency and avoid unintended estoppel. So thank you, everyone, so much for attending, and we hope you can join us again.